Okay, what's going on, boys? This is the 4-2-3-1 tactics. It's a bit of an experimental tactic. And the idea behind this is we take into account what we had last year with the 4-2-3-1, and that was stability. And then what we do is we incorporate it into a very interesting system where you have one player and right back helping to make a midfield of three. And also we're using the use of shadow strikers. Now, contrary to last year, in contrast, should I say, and contrary to opinion, people saying a 4-2-3-1 is finished. I don't think it is. I think the issue is these players, a Lamb and a Ram, you can have shadow strikers here, but you can also have half wingers. So if you want to make this as a wide formation, for example, you could do something like this, like that. And you can see it was still attacking that. You could argue that 4-3-3 with that two CDMs that it can be in a shadow striker. So in comparison to that formation, this gives you a bit more defensive structure. But the issue is players over here in these roles. I'm going to tell you what players you can use, right? So as you can see, what I've done in my native team is I put Son as a poacher. It's important that he's a poacher. Whoever you have in striker here is very, very important that this player is a poacher. And then as you can see behind him, we have Neymar. Now, Neymar would be a perfect example of someone that has that ability to play that role. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an example for the Lamb and a Ram. This is where it's difficult to get players in their native positions, okay? So it's very, very hard to get shadow strikers who've got pace because you can't just put anyone here. This is the only downside with this formation. You can't just get away with any Tom, Dick, or Harry. You have to actually go with someone that's got the stats. So if we go into Footbin, I want to go custom filter. We're going to go sprint speed. We're going to put the sprint speed to 85, okay? Now you can see with 85 sprint speed, we don't have that many cams available, okay? We only have a few cams. You can see Rayton, I think that's how you say her name. She's a very cheap card. She's the only one. Lavelle is actually not a bad card. Lavelle might work well. James might work well. Alvarez with a Hunter. Dembele would work well. Kirby. I might use some other count. DRB, Kudus. These are all cards that can play those cam roles. Now, the benefit is, thankfully, there's no Lamb and Ram. It's just cams. So if you want to be using any of these cards, players like David Neres would be a good way to test this formation. Now, Cliver, Ansu Fati. The recurring theme is you need someone here who has above 85 sprint speed, and that is what is difficult. But if you can get the paciest players, to be honest, if I was to, let's say, if I was to do this in an ideal world, you'd want 90 sprint speed. At this stage of the game, there's no one out there. DRB, Dembele, Rafa might be another choice. So there isn't really that much. So we're stuck for choices here. But if you can, try to get whatever you can cheap-wise. As I said, Rayton is actually a good card. Lavelle is actually a good card. And Kirby. So you're looking for those cheap links. The Women's Premier League is actually a very, very good option for that. So that is the card you want to be using in that territory. Now, because you can't adjust the width, they're not wide, but they're also not so narrow they're behind the striker. They're like kind of in between. Definitely give this one a go. You might like it. I actually like it. I'm just having difficulties right now with the gap between the midfield line and the shadow strikers because there's no one in the middle. And that is why I put a false back in. It's because at least if I have 3 centre mids, I can trigger 1 centre mid, or I can trigger my false back going forward. I can trigger someone to go forward. That's the only weakness I would say with this formation right now for my testing. Again, we're still in testing purposes, but is this midfield over here? There's literally no one there per se. Not no one there, but problem is when you win the ball back, those players are too far ahead. And sometimes you can feel isolated in this midfield region. So that is the reason why we put Caddy as a false back. If you got a false back plus variation of the card, even better. Now, one of the key things with this formation and one of the main benefits you're going to have is defensive stability. So maybe you could argue, although this is not a counter-attack formation, but those that like to play that counter-attack style of play, this could be very much the option. You ideally want to go with holding players here. Again, there's not that many holding cards available. Again, if you want to go on Footbin, you just type in holding plus. And then what we're going to do is we're going to change the sprint speed here. We're going to change that to, 78 because we want to keep it a bit conservative, okay? So you can see there's a lot of holding cards here. In particular, we're looking for CDMs and native CDMs. There's quite a lot of good cards. Lema, De Jong, Tonali is kind of what I'm using. And they've got the holding plus, even better. So some of these cards you've got like the Barellas, the De Jongs, Zacharias, the Lemas. Some of these cards are actually very, very effective in these roles. So that's what I would say here. So if you're struggling defensively, although people are saying this formation is quote unquote finished, I think that is not the case. I don't think it's finished. I think it has a different use case. But that is why we had to put one of the false backs in. I think without the false back, you can try it. But I think the problem is this gap over here between the two teams, the split is too much. And sometimes when you have two CDMs, I'm looking at it as, okay, your opponent has two strikers. Let's say typically, like, let's say a two striker formation, right? So you're going to get outnumbered numerically if you have two players pressing your two CDMs. Or if you have, for example, your opponent's two strikers, for example, pushed up to get your centre backs, their two centre mids pushed up against your CDMs, and your left mid and right mid also is going to be a 4 versus 4. And then you're going to have to do a driven pass through the lines to get the ball to these players, unless you have the ability to bring a player to come close. So one thing we mitigated for that, so what we've done is no short passing. We got rid of counter attack. Although short passing is good, it stops the players from getting in behind. You don't want that. You want the players to keep continuing to make those runs in behind. So you don't want that player to come short. And don't forget, you can check out all my tactics on fcrolls.com or a new link, EA. That's a terrible. .efc.gg. EFC.gg. You'll take a link to type that in your browser. That will take you to a link of all my tactics as well. So that's why we don't want to use short passing. So although it seems logical, you'd think, okay, the solution is use short passing. Maybe if you're a high level player and you use player lock and you use these players, and then you like to make those runs behind with the player lock and L1 triggers, okay, that could be a solution. It could be a potential solution if you want to do that. However, I would say balance is the way to go. Counter-attack is probably, if you find the distance between the midfield too great and you want to narrow that distance, balance is good because players will still make it run it behind, but they won't just get in behind all the time. So you're not going to be forcing those players to get in behind. So you have those options at least in midfield. And that's when we've got balance. Now, one thing you could do is, let's say one of the players, for example, the centre mid, what you could do is that instead of a holding from a deep line playmaker and put this player as roaming. So at least you kind of have like two false backs. So you got a false back here and you got another centre mid and you get kind of got this player that will effectively try to come in between the lines. I just realized I had some music playing in the background. Hopefully I didn't turn up on the video. But yeah, at least you got those two players roaming in the midfield. So Tonali and De Jong, I would definitely recommend a good combination like that. That's something that you can do. The back three is the same. We left the fullback on balance. No fullback defend. I think it's completely fine because you have two CDMs. You're completely fine. And the benefit is, one of the key benefits with Tonali as being a roaming CDM is that they can move across the width of the pitch to support attacks. So they had that ability. But the main key thing is, look, I don't think it's an issue with Kadioglu false back. I don't think so. We're in testing phase anyway, so this doesn't have to be perfect. But you can always remove this if you want to. But that is basically a tactic. So yeah, this would be the code here. It will be 9 capital Echo capital Victor capital 9 capital Echo capital Victor normal Foxtrot capital uniform $, capital Echo capital Hotel question mark and capital November. You know, those codes, you know, I really don't like the placement, especially if you're watching the video, listen to in the background. It actually can be sometimes very, very difficult to grasp. But that is the 4-2-3-1 custom tactics. Let me know. Again, we're still in testing phase. Let me know your comment section down below. What I'm thinking of long term, this is my long-term solution, is potentially putting this player, for example, as a playmaker and putting like roaming playmakers here. This is something that I've been trying, like this. So they would basically have the ability to go into those areas. They don't go too wide because playmakers, they don't go too wide, but they kind of in between the Shadow Strike and Sun. That's something I've been trying now, but I've only played it for a game or two, even less than a game. So maybe like 2/3 of a game, if that, or maybe a game in total, actually, with both games combined. So something I've not fully explored yet, but that's something I'll be looking into. But let me know your feedback. Again, I'll post all your feedback here. Or, of course, you can post your feedback in the Discord or anything that you find. DM me on Twitter, anywhere that you think is viable for feedback. Anyways, thanks for watching. Take it easy, and, of course, catch you next time. Peace out.